Here we go with part 2 of my presentation of the theme that I chose, which is the glory of God in the Old Testament. And I will start with a definition. So the glory of God is the magnificence of his many perfections, which he displays in his creative and redemptive acts, in order to make his glory known to those in his presence. The glory of God is seen throughout the biblical story and forms the origin, content, and goal of the entire biblical narrative. In fact, God communicates his glory through his creation, image bearers, providence, and redemptive acts. God's people respond by glorifying him. God receives glory and, through uniting his people to Christ, shares his glory with them. The glory of God is a magnificent biblical theme. It is addressed in every major biblical section related to every major biblical doctrine throughout the biblical story. The centrality of glory, of the theme of glory in the Old Testament. There are many key turning points in the biblical story that stress God's glory and attest to its manifestations. So let's see together as many key passages of the Old Testament signify and point to God's glory. We see God's glory which is revealed through creation, Genesis 1, Psalm 19, and also Romans, although it's not Old Testament, Romans 1. Again, it is identified with human's creation in the image of God, crowned with glory. Genesis chapters 1 and 2, Psalm 8, and again 1 Corinthians 11. It is linked to the Exodus, and that's very important. So we see Exodus 3, 13, 16, 24, and 34. It is linked to fire, shining, and bright light. Exodus 3, 13, 16 again, 24, 34. Again, we see Leviticus 9, Isaiah 60, Ezekiel 1, 10, 43, and then we shift to the New Testament, which we'll talk later in Luke 2, 2 Corinthians 3, 4, Hebrews 1, and Revelation 18, 21. Then it refers to a cloud, Exodus 16, 24, 40, Leviticus 9, Numbers 14, 16, 42, Deuteronomy 5, 1 Kings 8, 2 Chronicles 5, and again in the New Testament, Luke, Acts 1. And then it refers to the Sabbath, so the day of the rest of the Lord, Exodus 19. It is revealed to Moses in Exodus 33. It fills the tabernacle in Exodus 40, Leviticus 9, Numbers 14, 16, and 42, and 20. It fills the earth, Numbers 14, Psalm 19, and Isaiah 6. It fills the temple, 1 Kings chapter 8. It is above the heavens in Psalm 8 and Psalm 113. It is revealed in visions to Isaiah, Isaiah 6. It is revealed in visions to Ezekiel, Ezekiel 1, 3, 8, 9, 10, 18. It is identified with God's people, which is Israel, Isaiah 40, 43, and 60. If we unfold those topics, we can easily find it, and as a continuation throughout the Old Testament, finalizing and ending in the New Testament in very specific key passages, which is the glory linked to his incarnation, John 1, Mark 9, Hebrew 1. The birth narratives, Luke 2, 14 and 32. Sorry, it was verse 32. Then we see the glory of God in the miracles that Jesus operated. In John 2, 11, in his transfiguration in Matthew 17, Mark 9, Luke 9, and 2 Peter 1. Again, we see suffering and crucifixion and we see the glory of God in those passages, namely John 7, John 12, 23, and 17, 21, Luke 24, Romans 3, 1 Peter 1. Then again, we see it in the resurrection and exaltation, Acts 3, Romans 6, Philippians 2, Hebrews 2, Peter 1, Revelation 5, Acts 2, and 3, and 1 Timothy 3. In Jesus' ascension, Acts 1 and 1 Timothy 3. Again, in Jesus' reign, in Stephen's vision that we find in Acts 7 and Mark 10. Again, we see it in the victory, judgment, and his coming judgment in Matthew 16 and 19, 24, 25, Mark 8, 10, 13, Luke 9, 21, Romans 8, Titus 2, and 2 Thessalonians 1. Again, God's glory is identified with the Holy Spirit in 1 Peter 4, in John 16, and Ephesians 1. It is identified with the church, Ephesians 1, Ephesians 3, Ephesians 5. And finally, it is manifested in the new creation, Isaiah 66, Romans 8, and Revelation 21, 22. This is there is a last part of this second file, which is the meaning of God's glory. In a sense, God's glory is a grandeur of his many perfections transferred and communicated through God's special presence, as it is the pillars of glory and of fire in Exodus 13, or the glory that filled the tabernacle in chapter 40 of Exodus. The primary Hebrew term for glory is kavod. The primary Greek term for glory is doxa, referring to God's manifestation of his person, presence, works, especially his power, judgment, and salvation. God's glory is intrinsic and extrinsic. God's intrinsic glory refers to the fact that it belongs to him alone as God, not dependent on his works. God's extrinsic glory, instead, is communicated in his works of creation, providence, redemption, and consummation. Our triune God who displays his glory largely through his creation, image bearers, providence, and redemptive acts. And God's people respond by glorifying him. God receives glory and, uniting his people to Christ, shares his glory with them.